and let's get started. We did ask if any of you had questions. We didn't receive a lot of questions, so we thought it might be helpful to go through the application again, and then we'll open the floor for additional questions. All right, so let's go ahead. Adrian, can you keep an eye on the waiting room if you don't mind? Alrighty. So our application timeline, pretty self-explanatory. It closes February 2nd at 11:59 p.m. We will be going through application review. We have an external review team that will be viewing all applications, and we will be conducting interviews in March, which is also, no, I was about to say that's next month, but not yet, in March. And we expect to announce our fourth cohort of scholars in April 2024. Someone did ask about the next term. So the next term will begin November 2024, and that will be for our fifth cohort of Marshall Motley Scholars. At this time, the program is for 5 cohorts in total. So we are encouraging people, if you want to jump in there and please go ahead and apply, because it's a wonderful opportunity. Okay, so program benefits, it's just amazing. You'll see a full law school scholarship for tuition, room, board, and incidentals. The purpose of the program is really to alleviate the debt burden that so many students have, and that prevents them from pursuing a civil rights career. Someone did ask the question about financial aid, and the goal and the hope is that this program will so help you and so alleviate that debt burden that you really won't have to engage with your financial aid office. The program also provides summer internships and other civil rights organizations with offices in the South. That would be after your 1L and 2L year, a 2-year postgraduate fellowship once you graduate from law school, and that will be at a national, regional, or local civil rights organization with a racial justice law focus in the South, and also access to special trainings. We have a scholars retreat, academic boot camp, so we have some other things and activities that our scholars do participate in. Eligibility, again, pretty self-explanatory here. Eligible candidates will need to hold a bachelor's degree from an accredited university by September 2024. You need to be admitted to or expect to be admitted to an ABA accredited law school, again, as a first year and full-time law student to begin in fall 2024. That's also a question that we get quite a bit. And eligible candidates also need to be US citizens or students with permanent resident status. So again, this program is for first year and full-time students. It does not support, taking or applying in your second semester or going to school on a part-time basis. Okay. So what we're going to quickly just go through, these are just some of the components. People just said they had certain questions about how to best fill these out. Your law school admission status, the letters of recommendation, transcripts and resumes, your scores, career interests, personal statement and essay, video questions, there are 4 this year. And of course, the application will also ask for demographic information. And again, that's completely optional. Adria, you want to take it from here for law school admission status?
Sure, happy to do that. And I want to welcome those who have joined us for this office hours. Certainly we are here on Zoom, but also want to make this as informal as we can in terms of making sure that you get your questions answered. So along the way, we'll be keeping an eye on the chat. So if there are questions that you have that we don't get to or that we don't address in that particular section, please, by all means, feel free to put those questions in the chat. But so happy to talk about law school admission status. So obviously this program covers the cost of law school. So we want to make sure that the individuals who are selected for the program are admitted to law school. Now, we understand that people may be at different places in the law school application process. So that is not required at the time that you submit your application for our program. So again, when you submit your application for the Marshall Motley Scholars Program, you do not have to have already been admitted to law school at that time. because our deadline is February the 2nd, and some people may not have received that first letter of admission. However, as we move through the process, and Christina highlighted that we will move into the finalist round in March, by the end of March. And so by that time, our expectation is that anyone who moves to that finalist round will have been admitted to law school, to at least one law school. You may still be waiting to hear back from other law schools to which you've applied, and that is perfectly fine. But we want to ensure that anybody who goes to the final round of the selection process has been admitted to law school and will be someone who will be viable for our program because they have been admitted to law school. And I'll go ahead, Christina, and jump right in, I guess, for the personal statement and essay, because I think that's the portion of our application, or at least one. The videos, sometimes people have lots of questions about, but I think generally speaking, the questions around the personal statement and the essay around what are you looking for? What is it that the candidate that is successful needs to say? So we'll try to talk a little bit about that here. So here are a few tips, and these are just sort of the basic fundamental tips, but certainly we want to emphasize, because in haste and excitement, sometimes the details and small things may fall through the cracks. So you want to make sure that you read each prompt carefully. And that's important because I think, especially if people have seen various versions of our application in previous years, the questions can change, and they have changed, in fact. So you really want to look at the prompt and understand exactly what is being asked of you. And then I think a helpful next step is to create an outline. So that way you're ensuring that the points that are asked for in the prompt are addressed in what you write. So creating an outline before jumping right into writing can be helpful. Certainly, you also want to check for spelling, grammar, and punctuation. A second eye can be helpful. Oftentimes, if we worked on a document and we're close to it, sometimes it's easy to miss a stray period or a punctuation or a grammatical problem there. So, you want to go through with a fine-tooth comb and then also maybe get a second set of eyes. And then you see it here again because we want to emphasize this. Ensure that the prompt has been addressed. It's great to have a wonderful personal statement and well written, and that's certainly something that we're looking for, certainly a good, strong work product. But if it does not address the prompt, unfortunately, it misses the mark and may not show all of the ways in which you are committed to this work and be the best representation of that. So please, please be sure to read the prompt carefully and make sure that your response addresses it. And here are a few other tips, and they really center around the content, because of course you're gonna answer the prompt. It's gonna be there's gonna be no grammatical errors because we've already discussed that. So you want to ensure that the personal statement and the essay, and really the entire application, articulates your passion and your commitment for racial justice, specifically racial justice on behalf of Black communities in the South. That is the central mission of the Marshall Motley Scholars Program. There are other programs out there that focus on different aspects. So you may have a program about social justice that's more broad. There may be one about racial justice, but it's all over the country versus the South. This is a very unique and nuanced program. And so we're looking for people whose commitment falls within the scope of that mission. So you want to be able to articulate that clearly, how your passion and your commitment ties in to the mission of this program. And then, of course, any sort of nuance or depth that you can show, because I think it's very easy to regurgitate the words that I just shared to say, yes, I'm committed to pursuing racial justice on behalf of Black communities in the South. But what are some examples or things that you have already done to demonstrate that commitment, to show that you even understand what the issues are that are confronting Black communities in the South. So that again goes beyond sort of the surface or something that perhaps an AI tool could create for you. It's got to be able to show that you have some understanding of what the issues are because this is the commitment that you are making. So that is also important. And then finally, highlighting any tangible actions you've already taken. So going beyond just sort of the theoretical idea of this is what I want to do for my future, you can already start to show us, this is already the work that I'm doing now. Certainly, you don't have to be a lawyer in order to be working in pursuit of racial justice. And so there may be ways in your, if you're currently enrolled in school, your campus community, in your larger community in terms of your service. There may be people who have already graduated from college and are doing this as a part of their work or doing this in a host of other ways. I think you want to identify those things. It may be in an academic setting, research papers that you've done, classes that you've taken, but anything that's tangible, because you've got to know that every single person who submits an application for our program is going to say that they are committed to racial justice. Every single one, hopefully, because that's like a threshold. And so what you want to be able to do is show us, no, this is beyond words. This is something that is a part of who I am, maybe even in the context of my lived experience. So tangible actions that you've already taken are important.
And Andrew, I was just going to jump in there because I know some people have, asked what I'm not from the South, or, I haven't taken courses specifically, geared toward racial justice. And, we've had candidates, include just personal stories about, their families, neighbors, loved ones, and they're very effective. So those are also some, you could think outside of the box for different ways and different, I guess, connections that you might have towards racial justice or with Black communities.
Yes, thank you for interjecting that, Christina, because and certainly the cohorts of Marshall Motley scholars reflect that. So we've got individuals who are a part of this program who are not from the South. Certainly, a number of them are, but others may have a connection through their familial ties. Others may have gotten an interest in a research pursuit that they were having, and through that academic research, they've gotten and grown in their interest and understanding of racial justice in general, but then also the ways in which the South is intricately tied to the racial justice movement for Black people all over this country, but the root of it is in the South. So there are lots of ways that you can do that. We even had someone in a previous year who was in a completely different field altogether and kind of got the spark to do the work, and then took an affirmative step and left their career to begin getting closer to this goal. And so on the surface, it may not appear that this is someone who has this long history of racial justice. So it doesn't have to necessarily be that, but certainly something that demonstrates that commitment is important. And there are a variety of ways in which you can do that. So don't feel as if your experiences are not enough. I think it's incumbent upon you to put your very best foot forward and tell us why. I mean, everyone who is here, I assume, has the desire to become an attorney. And so you're going to be an advocate. And so consider this as your first case, that you are advocating for yourself to be able to make the prima facie case, if you will, as to why you should be the next Marshall Motley Scholar and the ways in which you've done that. So, and you may even think about it from a 360 view. So as you sit here, you think, well, maybe I've done this, maybe I've done that. But for people who have been a part of your life for a while, and you ask them, they may be able to make suggestions of experiences or things that you did that you've forgotten about. So in many ways, this can be a communal experience as well in terms of brainstorming and generating things that you might incorporate in your application.
And just one more detail, the personal statement and the essay are both 1,500 words maximum. we're not encouraging you to repeat the same content over and over, but you do want to try to provide enough information to, reach that 1,500 max. If you're only writing 100 words, that's not really telling us much. So just another kind of, hint to throw in.
No, and if I could just add to that, Christina, I
Yeah.
think it's a great point, because, and if you can, it's great if you can offer different content in different parts of the application. And so you want to think about it holistically, hopefully in the same way that you approached your law school application. So each piece of it should pull the same thread of racial justice. And so, if there are a number of experiences, or maybe you have 2 or 3 that are very compelling, you can perhaps present one and discuss one in the essay, and another in the personal statement, and another in the video, and so that you can weave it all together. But I would underscore Christina's point about making sure that it's a thoughtful response, because we have seen examples in the past where it's a very, very short response, and it communicates, perhaps rightly or wrongly, that this is not something that the applicant has spent a lot of time with, and certainly that doesn't put you in the best light in terms of the evaluation process.
That scores. Adri, I don't know. You're doing so well. You want to keep on?
I'll keep going. if you want, I'll do this and then you take the next
one. All right.
All right. So test scores. I think this is pretty basic. We do require test scores as a part of our application, and that can be the LSAT or GRE if you are using the GRE score to apply to law school. So there are some instances where people may have taken both tests, but they're actually using their LSAT score to apply for law school. You want to use the test score that you're using to apply to law school. And that is something we've gotten a lot of questions about this in terms of, well, how do I submit the score? It does not have to be an official report from LSAC that is issued to us. It can be a PDF. It can be, in fact, we would prefer it to be a PDF. There are situations where people have done screenshots, but I think the 2 most important things about your score submission are, 1, that we actually see the score, and number 2, that there's something in the image that indicates that it's your score, so that your name is present on there somewhere. Because if Christina, got a 175 on the LSAT, and I'm using a portion of, let's say, 180. Christina got a 180 on the LSAT, and I'm using, because if I'm going to use it, let it be really, really good. But I cut it off to where her name is not there to use it for my application. Obviously, that's problematic. So we want to make sure that the score is there and that there's some evidence that it is your score. I'll also sort of circle back to that first bullet regarding the reason that we ask for scores. This program is not designed to select the individuals who have the highest GPAs and test scores. I want to emphasize that, because people sometimes think, well, my score is not so high. I don't know if this is a program for me. And we have the wonderful opportunity and privilege to be able to redefine merit in ways that I think that are outside the scope of many scholarship programs that may look strictly at GPAs and test scores. So we collect that data only for the purpose of ensuring that we are evaluating students who are viable candidates for law school. And that means any law school. So if you've got a score and a profile that suggests that, then you will move on to the second phase of our process for our review committee to review your materials. In fact, the review committee will never see your test scores or your transcripts. Those test scores and the transcripts are only for our team's internal purpose. So when the review committee reviews your application, those documents are redacted, and they are evaluating your application solely upon the merit as defined by your commitment to this work, to the mission of pursuing racial justice on behalf of Black communities. And so I think that's critical, that's important, and we just really want to emphasize that. So don't be discouraged to the extent that you feel that your score is low, whatever low means. We encourage you to apply. And I've talked a little bit about the transcripts as well, but again, transcripts are for our internal purposes. And we just ask that you send a PDF of that. It does not have to be an official transcript. An unofficial transcript is selected. However, if you are chosen to be a part of this next cohort, we will ask for an official transcript to ensure and to confirm your graduation from the undergraduate institution that you've attended.
Okay, so I'll jump in here, and this is a new section, or a revised and updated section. These are the asynchronous video questions. If some of you are familiar with the application, previously there was, I think, just one video question, if I'm correct, Adria. That has been revised to 4 video questions. Some of you may be grumbling, but we're really trying to really gauge a couple of things here. You'll find that the first question is asking, how are you currently living the life of a Marshall Motley Scholar? And that's, again, gauging your level of, you probably heard the phrase, demonstrated commitment, just to see if you already align with the purpose and objective of the program. We also have a couple questions that deal with financial stewardship, because we want to know, have you fully researched civil rights law? Are you aware that it may not bring in as much money as a big law career would? And are you okay with that? Is that something you've really thought through and considered? Just thinking about the arc of the program, it's 13 years. And so we want to make sure that you've really thought through just the implications and the different stages of the program and phases and how that would impact you, and to make sure that this is something that you really want to pursue. There's also a question that will ask about how you deal with setbacks and failures, because if you've seen the news or anything, it's a hard road. And so we want our scholars to be prepared to, face those obstacles to racial justice, and to still be able to pick themselves back up and to get back in the game and pursue this commitment, on behalf of Black communities in the South. So just keep in mind, that's kind of what the overall purpose and objective is behind these 4 questions. The maximum, I believe, is 3 minutes, and then the others are 1 and 2 minute responses. So they're not too long. Just some tips, and I will say that we have additional tips noted on the application platform. There's a link that will take you to just some helpful tips from our communications department. But here's some here that are noted to find a quiet and well-lit place to record, so you're not speaking to us from the darkness. You also want to make sure that your background is clear from clutter, and you should use a tripod, or just make sure that your phone is set up so that you're not holding it out here and it's shaking. You want to test the sound quality before you record and upload your video, and make sure that you frame yourself properly. We do prefer a horizontal format. I know that someone had already emailed us about they had submitted a vertical format. That is okay, but we prefer a horizontal format in case we use it for promotional purposes in the future. Some additional tips, read the prompt carefully. Again, as Adria was saying, make sure that what you're saying is actually addressing the prompt and actually answering the questions. And, content is key. Watch your time and don't go over. And again, I love a script. So, write out what you're going to say, and definitely rehearse and go through it a number of times, so that by the time you do record, it just sounds and feels natural to you. These are some questions that we put that you can ask yourself as you're going through. Did you respond to the questions asked and guidelines outlined in the prompt? So I just touched on that. Did you use good judgment in using the time allotted to convey that demonstrated commitment against that phrase, to pursuing racial justice in the South? That's the overall theme of the application. And did you display the kind of communication skills that demonstrate that you have the potential to be an effective advocate for Black communities in the South and a strong representative of the Marshall Motley Scholars Program? So again, those are some things to keep in mind and questions to consider as you complete this section of the application. Adrian, you want to jump back in for our letters of recommendation?
I'll jump right in here. Hopefully this will be pretty straightforward. We do ask for 2 letters of recommendation. If you are an undergraduate or it's been, less than 5 years or so, we would welcome a letter from a professor who's able to speak to your experience and the things that you did as a student. However, if you are unable to get a letter, there are several other from a professor. There's several other options. Certainly, if you're working, someone that you worked with, an employer is a great option. A pre-law advisor that you've either currently worked with in the past, or other professionals. And I think the key there is making sure that these are other professionals as opposed to family members and relatives, which I suspect no one would do, but just want to emphasize that just to be on the safe side. But employers, pre-law advisors, other professionals, maybe people that you've worked with in the community for some of the racial justice work that you've been involved in, places where you've served, etc. All of that is important and key. And I'll push you all a little bit on the letter of recommendation piece because I think the easy approach to this, because you're applying for law school, is to simply use those same letters that you've already used for law school applications. And that's certainly acceptable. But I think sort of the next level of sort of competitiveness in this application pool is if those letters are tailored around the mission of the program. So for example, you may have a professor who talks about how you did in class, and certainly that's important. But if there's someone else out there who can speak specifically to the commitment that you have for racial justice, that helps support your case. Because again, if you're thinking about this as a case and as an advocate for yourself, you think about each component of this application as an exhibit. So if you're going to trial and you have the exhibits that support and provide evidence of the case that you're trying to prove. In this instance, the letters of recommendation are great, again, if they are part of your law school application. But again, the next level is to have those that speak to your commitment. And so that might mean a letter from someone else that you did not necessarily include as a part of your law school application. So don't abandon ship if you think, no, I think my letters of recommendation are good. Or if you're like, I'm looking at the date, it's January 9th, I may not have enough time to pivot and get another. That's also fine. This is more of a tip as opposed to a requirement. But again, anything that you can do to use this component of the application as well to connect to the larger mission of our program is ideal and key.
And I will just add, we usually get questions about this section, just so everyone is on the same page. Candidates and applicants should not post their own letters of recommendation. Once you create an account on Kaleidoscope, most of you know you'll be asked to name your recommender and input their email, and your recommender will be contacted to upload the letter directly to the platform. Oh, and one final thing, the application does ask for the recommenders to remove your name from the letter. That causes some confusion sometimes, and it's just to remove all points of bias, if possible. So they can list the applicant or the candidate in lieu of your name in those letters. If they've already written a letter with your name, don't, it's okay. But if you see that, that's why. Is there anything else for letters of recommendation?
No, I think maybe some practical things we have for them on the next slide around the format in which the letter should be submitted. And this is more for the recommenders, and we've given them these instructions, but just a little background for you in the event that one of your recommenders is like, well, what am I supposed to be doing? just know that they'll submit those letters as a PDF or as a Word doc. It's a 2-page max. I suspect some of you are, fabulous people, and someone could write 3 pages about you. But for the purpose of the program, we have a 2-page max, and that content is similar to what you probably have had in the past in terms of like identifying the relationship that you have, any sort of activities, and really again that fourth bullet there is the most important. If possible, speaking directly to your experience and commitment to civil rights and racial justice. So if it's someone who has knowledge of you and knowledge of that commitment, it would be wonderful and helpful to have their perspective as well as a part of these letters of recommendation.
Yeah, I think this is our last section on resumes that we're going to go over. So your resume, here's just some areas that you definitely want to make sure are included: your employment history, any internships that you've been a part of, extracurricular activities, especially those that relate to the mission of the program. Community service is important. Any awards or honors that you've received, and even hobbies, something that may relate to the program, may not. Feel free to include that as well. And you want to make sure that you highlight experiences that demonstrate your ability to lead, particularly in situations that present considerable challenges. Again, that theme of how do you experience and relate to setbacks and challenges, that's going to be something that the review committee is going to want to see. And you should also include experiences that demonstrate your commitment to civil rights, and in particular, racial justice in service to Black communities in the South. Okay, so that wraps up our talking points for the application. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so we can open the floor for our questions.
And Christina, we've got a number of questions in the chat. That might be a good place to start.
Okay. So I see this from Delisha. Some of us live in the South, but not an area in MMSP, but not in an area that MMSP covers as part of their scholarship. Can we still use our personal and work experiences if we still technically live in the geographic South?
Certainly, I would say yes to that. But I'm also curious where it is, because it's our geographic area is pretty expansive. But I also know, as someone who's lived most of my life in the South, that what the South is and isn't is very subjective. So
Yeah, I'm Delisha.
yeah.
So I live in Maryland. Certainly, we were a slave state, and I attended the University of Maryland. So I obviously went to school in buildings that former slaves had built. So that's why I say, like, technically, it's not considered the South for Marshall Motley as part of the 8-year commitment, but I feel like it's still technically the geographic South. The historical South.
Talk about it and make the case, but know too, as we talked about in the beginning, that is not a requirement for the program. And so I think if you can talk about your experience in Maryland, living, going to school, in a way that connects it to sort of this larger history of Black people in the South, I would say go for it. Just in the way that you've already articulated around the buildings that you went to school, like I would talk about all of those things.
Absolutely. Sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to make sure that
no, I'm glad you did.
No, it's fine.
My mind, I'm like, well, where is she? Where could it be? But Maryland, yes, we have had a number of conversations, and there are folks who also make the argument for DC, which I don't know, but I'll pause because that's not the purpose of our program today. Yeah. Right there, I'll stop.
And we do have a scholar from Maryland, so
yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay, so let's see. I would love to know more about how the non-traditional students switch careers. I'm in a similar boat and would like to know more of what they did to prepare themselves for the competitiveness of the application.
Yes. So I certainly cannot speak for them, but I will plug, and I'll have to try to figure out how to get you the information. So feel free to reach out. But we're actually doing an event, a virtual event next week with the National Urban League Young Professionals. And so these are people who are, in other careers, potentially looking to go to school. And so we'll have a panel of our scholars, all who have taken, I mean, I don't know what traditional is anymore, non-traditional, but people who have taken probably 7+ years off out of school before returning back. And so you can hear it from them directly. But what I can tell you is that of those who have come that path, they have been able to tie the work that they've been doing to the mission of the program. And I'll give you a couple examples. We have some former educators who are able to talk about there's inherently there are inequities in our educational system, no matter where you are, in ways that have a disparate impact on people because of their race. And so some of the scholars who've had that experience have been able to weave, the things that they were doing. Maybe they were a classroom teacher and administrator, but there are racial justice issues happening all around them. So they've been able to connect in that way. We had at least one scholar who worked in government before going to law school. And so I think probably framed it around issues of policy that they saw, things that they experienced as a part of the work that they are doing within government, and then making the case. I'm realizing to be able to really advance the causes that are important to me, that I've got to be outside of that governmental space and be an advocate as a civil rights attorney. So that's another way. I think, and I alluded to an example earlier for one of our scholars who worked in retail and had a pretty significant career in retail, but just felt this pulling, and then started to find ways to engage in the community, and really, then kind of left the career to find some opportunities to be on this path. And so those are just some of the examples that I think of off the top. We've got another scholar who spent a lot of time working in like Head Start communities, and just being able to see the experiences of the students and the families that they had a chance to work with. So those are some examples, but again, I think the central theme and key is figuring out where those racial justice issues show up for you now in the life and the career that you're doing, and to be able to tie it all in together. And honestly, I think while certainly we have students in our program who've gone straight from undergrad to law school, I think in some ways there's an advantage to those who have been out and worked for a while, and there are just more experiences that they have to draw on to be able to write about. I mean, you live longer, you got more that you can pull on. And so certainly just be encouraged as you apply, because we've had several people come that path and have been selected.
Okay, we have so many questions. Let's see. Pamela, you asked about 3 letters of recommendation. Previously, we did require 3 letters, but for this cycle, it's only 2 letters that are required. Let's see, program available. Yep, 5th cohort. Be for next time. Let's see. Yes, you will receive a copy of this webinar. We are recording. Thank you, Delisha. Let's see.
Alicia is helping with
Alicia's on it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what happened if I didn't receive a response yet from the law school that I've been applying for?
No problem. No problem. Now I'll say this, and I don't know that we said it explicitly. If you have applied, submitted your application already, or if you submit your application before February the 2nd, you have the opportunity to go in and update. And so what that means is, if you go ahead and get it in on, let's say, January 31st, and on February the 1st, you get admitted to a particular law school, then you can go back and update it. Or actually, you can update any part of your application up to the deadline, no matter what it is. You go back and you're like, oh my God. So nobody's making any decisions on it before February 2nd. So if you're like, I forgot this, that, go back and update it. Now, after February the 2nd, all the other components of the application will be closed. You can't go in and update it except for your law school acceptances. So as we continue to move, so let's just say you apply February the 2nd, February 15th, you get your law school acceptance. You will be able to go back onto Kaleidoscope, log in, and then update and include that information for us. So certainly I'm sure you're more anxious about it than we are in terms of getting that first letter of acceptance. So, but we don't want you to be worried about it for the purposes of our program, because you still have a little bit of time.
And if you have any issues with that, you can always email us, marshall-motley@nwacpldf.org, if you find that you're having trouble updating your application. Okay. Thank you. Our Delisha is helping us here. Tamaya asked, forgive me if I'm saying anyone's name incorrectly, what are roles that can be pursued post-grad outside of traditional litigation?
So I appreciate that question. And so I guess the short answer is it depends, which is the answer to most things. There are a number of things you can do. I see Delisha in the chat holding us down with the judicial clerkships. Yes, that is an option. And in fact, our very first cohort of scholars is graduating this year, like in a few months. And so 2 of those individuals will actually be clerking with different courts in the South for the first year after graduation. So if you're one of those people who are like, man, I really want to be a civil rights attorney, but like the idea of clerking for a judge is something that is compelling and resonates with me as well, you don't have to choose. And so we do allow for up to 2 years. If someone wants to do a clerkship, you can do that for up to 2 years, and it will count towards your commitment to the program, which we haven't really talked a lot about, but I can mention here. So after the 3 years of law school, each Marshall Motley Scholar does a 2-year fellowship. Following that 2-year fellowship, the expectation is that they practice for 8 years as a civil rights attorney in the South. And so hypothetically, some individual decides, in fact, actually the 2 individuals that we know who will be clerking next year, that year of clerking will count towards their 8 years of practice. We will still ask them to do the fellowship because we think it's essential training and preparation for the practice of civil rights law. However, you can still do that clerkship, and you can do it, immediately following graduation. As far as sort of like what things can you do beyond that, there are a number of options. And so the folks who are in that first cohort of scholars, many of them will be working for civil rights organizations. That's probably the primary role that people will have, but we also have scholars who are interested in starting their own practices. And that's something that we want to support as well. And so we are even now contemplating ways in which we can help build capacity and make sure that scholars who want to hang up their own shingle and do that kind of work will also have the support and opportunity to do that. There are some folks who are interested in, I guess, policy, if you will, and there is some room for that. But I do want to be clear that the mission of this program is to populate the South with civil rights attorneys. And so I just want to be clear about that, because there are many great ways in which you can pursue the cause of racial justice. Being a civil rights attorney is one, but there are other ways to do it. But for the purpose of this program, we are looking to prepare folks to be civil rights attorneys in the South. But happy to answer if you've got more specific questions that you're thinking about in terms of, well, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Does it fit? Please, by all means, reach out to us separately, and we'll be happy to have a conversation about it.
We have 2 hands raised. Are these questions in response to what Adria just said? Okay, you want to go? Okay.
I'll go. I'll start. My name is Abia Minor, and I think that's an amazing question because it's one that it's been a burning question for me. I work mostly in the government space. And so my spark it started with legislative advocacy, and it started to expound into civil rights law and public interest law. I spoke with organizations like the ACLU is a space that I see myself in. Also like the Southern Federation for Southern Cooperative is another organization that I see myself from. And excuse me if I mess up the acronym for that. And so I just wanted to know what was the level of opportunity, and if I had expounded on that in my application, does it miss the mark, or kind of does it fit what you're looking for as a candidate?
I think it certainly fits, and thank you for that question. I think it certainly fits. And in fact, we partner with several ACLU affiliates. That's and in fact, we'll have at least one scholar. We have one scholar who will be graduating, who will be working with an ACLU affiliate in their 2-year fellowship. And so, and I get on some level, it is splitting hairs in terms of advocacy, legislative advocacy, litigation. And so what you will find, and what you probably have already found, is that a number of the organizations that do this work are doing it in multiple ways. So they're doing it in the courts, they're doing it at the Capitol, they're doing it in communities, and really taking a holistic approach to the work. Even the Legal Defense Fund, our organization, who has been doing this work forever, has evolved in the ways in which it's approaching the work to where we have a whole community organizing department. There's a host of ways in which you can do the work, and we try to provide some degree of flexibility and latitude for scholars to pursue. So even we've got a scholar in our first cohort who is interested in heirs property work, so helping Black people in the South be able to hold on to their land. So that may not necessarily be like litigation per se, but certainly we try to allow some room for that kind of work as well. So I think the key for the application, though, is to be clear that you are looking to be a civil rights attorney, because we have, I think, had some really strong applicants in the past who have made some missteps there, where they where it's probably a little too broad. Or I think, Christine, we had someone who was a fantastic candidate last year who somewhere in the application said, yeah, I don't really see myself practicing law. And I'm like, oh man, that's really unfortunate, because otherwise they probably would have been in a program. And I think they didn't even intend to say it, but just in the process of writing, I was like, well, you said it. So so just be clear that you want to do civil rights work as an attorney.
Okay, I don't want to ignore the written question. So if you're raising your hand and we haven't gotten to you, please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll definitely do a follow-up.
And I'll try to be more efficient. I'm going to move quickly with the answers.
I know you're fine. Okay, so Donovan asked, what are some differences between good answers to video questions 2 and 3? And I would just quickly say, number 2 asks how you would be a good financial steward of the funds you would receive. And question 3 is more about, why are you ready to make a substantial commitment to civil rights law, knowing that it may bring a decreased or a limited earning potential as compared to big law. So I would recommend that for question 2, it would be helpful to talk about how you're presently a good financial steward. Do you budget, et cetera, just so, the review committee can see that you'd be a responsible person to, to handle your stipends and allocate your funds. We kind of touched on this in one of our webinars, but, these are monies for educational purposes. So you definitely don't want to say that you'd be, allocating the money to non-educational purposes. That's a big no-no. Whereas question 3, it's really going back to that issue of demonstrated commitment, that even if this brought a limited earning potential, I'm still committed to the work, and this is why. So I hope that helps, Donovan. And let's see. how do I differentiate my answer to the video response 1 from the personal statement? Do you want to touch on that, Adria, or you might be answering something else? So that is how are you currently living the life?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. I think the key, because that's the one, how am I currently living the life of a Marshall Mountain Scholar? And I think that's the place in which you're going to highlight the things that you're already doing. So Marshall Mountain Scholar is someone who gives voice to issues as they see them, who is in pursuit of racial justice. And so you want to talk about the things that you are currently doing and why they are important to you and why this is a commitment that you want to make, in a nutshell.
Thank you. Let's
Christina,
see.
we got a couple of hands here that I don't know have questions in the chat. So I thought.
Oh yeah, I was trying to get through the written questions.
Okay.
But Alice, is your question related to what we were just talking about, the personal statement? No, something, okay.
And then there was another, yes, I was about to say there was a hand that was up that went back down. Roll Tide.
Yeah, mine was because I was writing my question within the box because it was pretty long anyway. But y'all had already addressed it quite in depth. But my question was in I'm sorry, let me get it together. The personal statement and then the essay itself. I know that the prime difference between the two are the background versus the future expectations. And I know you already touched on like what is civil rights law. I'm sorry, I'm gonna give you background just to help me. So I originally started off as a nursing major and I was in nursing school. And then that kind of like opened my eyes to realize, hey, there might need to be a little bit more of like civil rights attorneys within like the health law. And so I was wondering, would that like encompass, is that pretty on brand to what the scholarship is for too? Because I guess that was a primary concern of mine personally.
Yes, appreciate your
Okay.
question. Shouldn't be a concern. There are
Okay.
many ways in which, in fact, civil rights law intersects with just about every area of the law. It is very much interdisciplinary. We've seen that. We got a scholar who wants to do environmental justice, so like civil rights and environmental law, economic justice, reproductive justice. And so whatever your interest is, I think the key is that you be able to connect the dots for us in a way where it's like, oh yeah, I know exactly what he's saying. I think, we know about the inequities in the healthcare system and the ways it has disparate impact on Black people specifically. So you just want to be able to articulate.
Okay. Thank you. Y'all, amazing job. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will there be any in-person events that the program hosts? Devin asked that question.
Yes. So the primary in-person event each year is the Scholar Retreat. At least, once a year, we gather all the scholars together in one place, which is a great time and a lot of fun. In addition to that, we started an event for our 1L scholars, an academic boot camp that we do right before the school year begins to make sure that everybody has, we ready, we locked in, and we have what we need to be successful, because we want you to be successful. And so that is an in-person event for our 1L scholars.
Okay. Alice, been so patient.
You all gave some great information. I was trying to write it, but it is kind of long. Being non-traditional, my undergrad school encouraged just 1 page for a resume, which that doesn't even begin to cover mine. So is there a limit to what you would expect on the resume portion?
No, I think it can
no.
be, it can certainly be longer. Certainly if you have more experience. And for law school in general, even law schools are welcoming and open to, 2 pages plus, because they want to see all of your experiences. And certainly we would be open and would welcome that as well.
Thank you.
Welcome. So I believe that answers all our questions. Is there any other question? Oh, Eden? Last
Hi
question?
there. Yes, last question. I think I just needed maybe a little bit of elaboration. Adrian has been answering it greatly. I think I'm also on the route of the non-traditional student coming in. I graduated about 2012, so I've been on the work field for a while, but I just feel like I've been fighting on my own for social justice. And so when I'm trying to put the application together, I think that's one thing that I'm also struggling with, is that how do you minimize the experience that you have within the resume and personal statements, because there's so much to tell. So if you can tap on that for just clarification, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it sounds, somewhat similar to Alice's question. And I think certainly in cases where there's a word limit, you've got to work within that. The resume gives you a little bit of more flexibility and latitude. But, think and reflect on those things that are most substantial, and compelling, and maybe try to prioritize talking about those experiences and highlighting them in the personal statement as well. Because of course, you're not going to be able to tell them all, but maybe you talk about certain set of things, personal statement, you may be able to hit something else in the video and then something else in the essay. But don't be afraid to use the space that is given. I'll just say that. Certainly we have some limitations, but don't be afraid to use the space that is given.
Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate you all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last question, Pamela.
Thanks so much for this like expounding on everything. I had a quick question. So on the website it says in phase 3, right, the selection process, that it's one of the most important aspects of it. Just wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about that part, like the phase 2.
Sure, I'll do it quickly, but also know for those individuals who are selected to move to the next round, we'll have a whole nother sort of situation like where we will prepare you and give you some background information and really try to, a little bit of coaching as well for that final phase. But it will be a panel of individuals who have been doing the work as civil rights attorneys, maybe in government, elsewhere, but who are really excited about this program and excited about the prospect that there is going to be sort of a next wave of individuals who will be doing this work in the South, and is just excited and happy to engage with you. It really is one of the best parts of the process, I think. And so what we'll do, I'll tell you, interviews about 45 minutes or so. You'll be asked about your background and then your hopes for the future, how the ways in which you see yourself doing this work. But again, when we get to that phase, we'll have a whole nother round of preparation and give you an opportunity to ask questions that you may have about next steps.
Miss Adria, I'm so sorry. Just for those of us who may need to budget,
Thank you.
will those interviews be in person just in case we need to travel and budget for it?
Thank you for the question. The interviews will be in person, but that is actually something that we will take care of. So it's not something for you to budget, because you can only budget if you have one. If you don't have a budget, it's like, what do you do? What do you do? Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get there. So again, but please don't worry. We have contemplated that, and we will share more details at that time. But I'm glad you have a budget.
Yes, budgets are good. Budgets are our friends. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We had a wonderful time with you. Please go ahead and get those applications started and submitted. And again, feel free to email us at marshall-motley@naacpldf.org if you have any follow-up questions. And we will be sending the recording, other documents like the application guide and brochure, and any other helpful links to our mailing list. So you will see that. So keep an eye out for that. And we wish you the best and hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
so much.